Forspoken launched last week, developed by Luminous Production, published by Square Enix, and it generated quite a bit of buzz on the web as it became the butt of many jokes and the victim of many memes. Clips of dialogue from the game began to circulate en masse the day before the official launch, clips that showed what most agree is obnoxiously poor writing. Before long, the game was being review bombed on Metacritic almost exclusively by people who had never played the game, but instead allowed their impressions from those clips drive their disdain for the new title. In this video, I wanted to actually let the game have a fair shake, shine some light on what the game does well, but also be forthcoming about the areas where the game really struggles to connect to the player. Just know up front, this game has a lot to offer that most people are neglecting to pay attention to. And while the game is far from perfect, I also believe the gaming community has a really ugly tendency to rush to mob mentality and squash many games' chances to stretch their wings. So let's dive in to Forspoken.
Don't worry, this will be quick.
Now, I will try to avoid any and all spoilers in this video as far as the story is concerned, but here's the basic breakdown of the game's base storyline.
That was batshit crazy.
You play as Frey, a 21-year-old orphan girl in New York City raised by multiple foster families who struggles to find where she belongs. In an attempt to break away from a group involved in petty crime, things go poorly for her. She finds herself back on the streets with no home and no money and no options. That's when she gets whisked away, isekai style, all the way to a strange realm called Athia, where she communicates with a voice in her head coming from the vambrace on her arm. The two of them are connected, and Cuff, as she names him, becomes your traveling companion, helping Frey unlock and understand the magical powers that she's awakened in this new land. For the rest of the game's story, you'll have to suffer through Cuff and Frey's rocky relationship, while Frey tries to figure out why the land is covered in corruption and driving the people who live there into isolation in one central city where the corruption hasn't yet spread. Frey is never really too keen on using her powers to help these strangers, but the people force heavy expectations on her to be their savior. So Frey goes from an outcast with no people and no purpose to suddenly having the weight of the world on her shoulders and the admiration of thousands of people, and she has to try to deal with that transition. So that's the basic gist. But let's talk about how some of this plays out in strange ways. Unfortunately, the setup to this story takes a very long time. By that I mean that you'll be playing the game for about an hour and a half before you ever really get to dive into your first real mission using your magic to combat enemies. And in that hour and a half, you're going to be getting a really heavy dose of a character that you probably aren't going to like too much. Frey is mouthy, moody, not very insightful or in touch with the people around her, and painfully pessimistic. You'll also have an extremely painfully bad sneaking section of the game to get through that feels completely pointless and poorly choreographed. The narration in the game also has this weird habit of inserting long, silent pauses between sentences or at the end of an exchange that feels very, very awkward, like you're just waiting for somebody, Frey, to say something, and they never do.
You can take it with you.
But after you get through that first hour and a half, the game starts to open up a little bit. You get access to your first small free roam area, and you can get a small sample of the activities out in the world, including locked labyrinths that each have their own unique boss fights and rewards, usually a new cloak to wear imbued with unique powers. There are forts to clear, caves to search, altars with permanent stat bonuses to unlock, and much, much more. This intro free roam area won't last you too long. You'll be pulled back into exposition that is long and slow. In fact, the pacing of the game in the first 6 hours I found to be really jarring. The combat is fast, fluid, dynamic, making split-second decisions about how you're going to approach each engagement, reacting to information in real time about your enemy's resistances and vulnerabilities, and their movesets, and tells for various attacks. Then you get pulled into a cutscene that drags on and on with long pauses and writing that seems unnatural.
She's beautiful. Those eyes. So kind. So comforting.
It's dialogue written for the gamer instead of for the characters, if that makes sense. Like they're trying to teach you about the world the characters are in, but in real life you wouldn't talk to somebody assuming a stranger is listening and they need extra information to keep up. This jarring push-pull in the pacing between fast-paced combat and slow exposition is off-putting for a while, but I found that at about 6 hours into the game for me, things changed dramatically. The world got much bigger, and the cutscenes far less frequent. I was free to move around the world much more quickly after unlocking new movement abilities and a new spell set as well to add on to the original geomancy that you start off with. I must admit, it took some stamina to force myself to get through those first 6 hours, but after I hit that breaking point, I really started to fall in love with the game. I was running up pillars doing backflips over fireballs to throw clusters of rocks at a goddess of war. I was calling down enormous firestorms erupting with lava shooting out of the ground to wipe an entire mob of enemies. I was running through huge groups of ads, tossing out static markers and then detonating them all at once in a maelstrom of green arcing light. And I was able to switch back and forth through all of those magic sets with the click of one button. And the game even introduces specific moves that will automatically switch your magic to a different type, like tossing out a fire whip to grab an enemy and pull them in for a close fury of fire-fisted punches. This part of the game is really fun. Beyond the combat, you'll also have exploration. This world is huge, and the different territories in Athia all have their own unique landscapes with magic coursing through them. There's the rocky, mountainous regions with deep crags and tall spires. There's the beautiful land of lakes and trees and fields of flowers. There's the long and open plains of waving deep green grass, and much more. Exploring these areas becomes much more involved as you learn new movement spells and ways of traversing the spaces. Your options are limitless. I tried to explore quite a bit, but when I finished the main story, I had only seen about half of the main sub-regions and had plenty more exploring to do. So to set expectations, I'd say you should plan on about 20 to 24 hours of Forspoken before you complete the main storyline. And frankly, I recommend that you do complete it, for reasons I'm about to dive into. But I'm about 30 hours into the game and I can see myself adding another 20 easily. Although I've seen some pretty compelling gameplay of mesmerizing combat from people who have already spent more than 100 hours refining their gear and leveling spells. A real light show of proper violence. But let's get back to our main protagonist, Frey and Cuff. As mentioned before, their dynamic is the one that got this game so much heat at launch. And it's not totally unwarranted. Frey is mouthy and hostile to almost everyone. She's deeply selfish and even vindictive. Cuff is pompous, demeaning, and insulting. They work together to protect one another throughout the game, but it's more because of their codependence on one another than it is out of friendship. You keep hoping it will get better, but it just kinda doesn't, up to a point. Again, I'll avoid all story spoilers, but this isn't because the writers couldn't write a good buddy cop vibe, it's actually by choice. Each of them is indeed flawed, and it's going to take a lot more than just going and beating up some bad guys together to fix it. They aren't actually supposed to fix that relationship. That's why I recommend enjoying Athia, but also getting the story wrapped up when you feel you're strong enough to progress to the next point. You can always come back, fast travel does exist in the game, and you're going to want to zip back and forth from region to region to get new gear, new spells, level up your stats, but also don't lose focus for too long. You're going to want to learn through the story about what makes Frey who she is and what makes Cuff who he is. That dynamic will change between them, but like I said, they got to sort through some big stuff first. So what's the verdict on this game? Is it a buy? Is it a pass? I'll tell you that after spending some time with Forspoken, I did in fact get to the point where I was excited to get back down into my office and fire the game up again. I was anxious to get back in there and level up my spells, find cool new ways to take down big threats. I was literally writing down notes in my phone as I thought of them when I wasn't playing the game about cool combos that I should try. The voice acting was solid, but the writing needs some help. The exposition is often very long-winded and tedious. Some quests seem unnecessarily long, like walking around the library manually reading books to study up on threats. I mean, it's totally in line with a mage-oriented game, but it's boring. The exploration side of the game has a lot to offer in terms of space to travel through and sights to see, but there isn't a whole lot of variety in the side quest activities from realm to realm, so it can feel like a new beautiful space with the same list of items to do in them. All in all, I feel the combat and magic systems carry a lot of weight along with the beauty of the Athian world. But there are some downright painful parts of the game too that you'll have to endure between the writing and how much time it takes Frey to get over being a whiny little punk. Personally, I'm glad I bought the game. I had a ton of fun with it despite its drawbacks. If this game sounds intriguing to you, I'd go ahead and pick it up. If you're on the fence, hey, I'd wait for the inevitable moment down the road when the game drops in price to like $40 or so. But I think the over-sensationalizing of the bandwagon hate on this game was absolutely a disservice to the game and to the gaming community and the developers who made it. Sometimes it's okay if a team fumbles the ball a couple of times in a game, as long as they deliver for their fans in the end. And for me, Forspoken did all of the above. Thanks for watching my review. I hope it shed more light on the game for you, the consumer. Be warm and well fed, my friends, and I'll catch you in the next one.
To be honest, I don't care what you think.